I posted a video a while back on how to make what I call survival flatbread. It was just all-purpose flour and water. If you didn't see it and you would like to, just check out the link above. Today, I'm stepping it up a notch by showing you how to mill your own whole wheat flour from wheat berries. Then I'll use that freshly milled flour to make two types of flatbread, a basic survival flatbread and a more traditional flour tortilla. And then I'll talk about what kind of whole wheat flour to buy at the store in case you don't want to mill your own. Now, to mill your own whole wheat flour, all you need are wheat berries and a way to grind them up. The type of wheat berries I'm using in this video are soft white wheat berries. Under the description, I have a link to Amazon that will take you directly to the actual type of wheat berries I'm using in this video. In a long-term, worst-case emergency situation, you want the most nutritious food you can find, and it might be hard to find. You can store wheat berries for up to 30 years, and when you mill your wheat berries, you get to keep all the nutrients, really making it one of the best foods you can store long-term for emergencies. I did a video about what I think the 11 most important foods are to store for emergencies. If you'd like to check it out in the link above. I include wheat berries in there and how to store them. Now, you can grind wheat berries with an electric or a manual mill. Manual mills take a lot of physical effort, they're slow, and can produce inconsistent flour unless you spend a lot of money on one. But you can buy an electric mill for that price. So if you mill on a regular basis, the ideal mill would be an electric one. If you're concerned about survival situation where the grid goes down for a long period of time and you have no way to power your electric mill, then you might think about buying an inexpensive manual one like this one here, and then just store it along with your wheat berries. If you're interested in giving this a try, but you don't want to spend the money on an electric grain mill right now, you might have something in your kitchen that would work, at least temporarily, until you can make a decision if you want to pursue this and then invest in a more expensive, high-quality grain mill. Now, the devices I'm going to talk about certainly don't work as well as a high-powered, good-quality electric grain mill, and some are expensive. But if you already have something in your kitchen, why not use it? See if you like doing something like this before investing in an electric grain mill. For example, you might have a powerful blender. I heard a Blendtec works fairly well. Even a Vitamix has been used. I think there's a certain kind of canister or container you can put on it with a milling blade, or even a coffee grinder. Now, I have a KRUPS coffee grinder, and it works fairly well, and it's affordable. At the time of this video, it was only $19. So if you just want to see if milling your own flour is something you might want to pursue, maybe this will work for you. One with a burr blade would work better though. If it looks like it's something you might want to continue doing, then just upgrade it at some point. Or you can use the NutriBullet 600. We use ours for making smoothies all the time, but I tested it grinding wheat berries with a milling blade, and it worked pretty well. It cost $69 with a milling blade at the time of this video. If you have a KitchenAid mixer, you can buy a KitchenAid grain mill for it, like this one. It works much better than all of the devices I just talked about. I've seen it selling for about $119 to $149 at the time of this video. See under the description for information on all of these things I just talked about. But none of these are going to work as well as a dedicated electric grain mill. If you plan on milling on a regular basis, you might want to buy a standalone grain mill like my Mockmill Lino 200. This one's a little pricey though. I'll post under the description several high-quality grain mills with all kinds of different price ranges. If I had to rank how well each device I talked about in this video ground up wheat berries in order, I'd say that the Mockmill was number 1, the KitchenAid grain mill number 2, the KRUPS coffee grinder number 3, the NutriBullet number 4, and the manual Corona grain grinder number 5. But to stay within the spirit of this video, I'll be using my KitchenAid attachment to grind my wheat berries. The first flatbread I'm making is my emergency survival flatbread with only 2 ingredients, water and freshly milled flour. I'll be grinding up 2 cups of soft white wheat berries. I'll get a little more than 1.5 cups of flour for every cup of milled wheat berries, so I'll end up with more than 3 cups. Did you know about 80% of the nutrients are removed during the milling process for the white flour you buy in the store? That's about 40 nutrients. And what they do is enrich what's left with typically 5 nutrients, and those are synthetic. Now, freshly ground wheat berries, on the other hand, provide most of the 44 essential nutrients to sustain life, except for a few like A, B12C, and iodine. Here are just a few of the nutrients that wheat berries do provide. Vitamins B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B9, vitamin E, K, calcium, magnesium, potassium, protein, copper, iron, and on and on. Now I ended up with a little over 3 cups of flour, but I'm only using 2.5 cups for this recipe. I'll use the rest for kneading and shaping. I warmed up 1 cup of water and will be adding some of it a little at a time to the freshly milled flour. It's important to add the water gradually. You'll likely not use all of it. However, it's better to side with too much water than not enough. I prefer slightly sticky dough because I can always add more flour during the kneading process. Now let it rest for 30 minutes. Time to knead the dough for 5 or 8 minutes. Now kneading helps distribute the ingredients evenly and helps with gluten development. Now at first it might seem a little sticky, but that's okay, this will dry out after a bit. Don't add any flour unless it's too sticky a little later in the process. Then add some flour if needed. Kneading helps with texture and a softer dough. Helps hold the shape when working with it. See how smooth and non-sticky this is. It's a good idea to let it rest for about 10 minutes. Now the goal is to make the dough balls between 45 and 50 grams or a little bigger than a golf ball to make 10 or 11 flatbreads that are 8 to 9 inches in diameter. My wife tends to make them around 47 grams. There are many ways to do this, but we find it easiest just to roll them on the work surface. We don't use flour or oil for the process. Let them rest for about 5 to 10 minutes. After letting the dough balls rest, it's time to roll them out. To form the flatbread shape, she first forms a small disc shape in her hands. Don't worry about using plenty of flour on the work surface and rolling pin. Very little is going inside the dough. It's just coating the outside. You can brush it off later if you want. Start in the middle of the flatbread and work your way towards the edge, rotating the flatbread and using flour to keep it from sticking to the work surface and rolling pin. Try not to go all the way past the edge when rolling it, at least at first. Your goal is to make them very thin. Don't worry if they're not perfectly round. For us, most of the time they're not. Well, we lucked out with this one. It's pretty round. I use a cast iron Comal pan. I prefer a medium-high to high temperature. Depending on how hot the pan is, I cook it for around 20 to 30 seconds per side. Just watch for bubbles to form. Once formed, you can turn it over. I find that when I barely tap some of the bubbles, it seems as if it encourages them to grow. Remember, this is flatbread with just flour and water. Putting each flatbread in a tortilla warmer or a pan with a lid right after cooking them helps them stay warm and soft by trapping the steam. It helps keep them from drying out and becoming tough. It also helps maintain the flatbread's texture.
It's good.
Now I'm going to show you how to make freshly milled flour tortillas. They're easy to make, tasty, and healthy. See the detailed recipe under the description. I'm milling 2 cups of soft white wheat berries with my mock mill. You should use this flour within 24 hours to get all the nutritious value. As soon as the wheat berry is exposed to the air, nutritional loss starts to occur because of oxidation. That's one reason freshly milled flour is so much healthier than store-bought flour that may have been on the shelves for weeks or even months. Now some people have a hard time digesting bread made from freshly milled flour because of the bran. All the bran is removed in some store-bought breads. In this recipe, I'll be removing just some of the bran by sifting it out. You can use a colander, but the holes are a little large, or a 40-mesh sifter like this one. See under the description for information on this. There's still plenty of healthy bran and germ in this flour. You can add the bran back gradually each time you make tortillas. Just add 1 tablespoon at a time until you don't have to remove any at all. Measure out 2 cups of freshly milled flour after sifting. To that, add a half a cup of all-purpose flour, making a total now of 2.5 cups of flour. The all-purpose flour helps make the dough easier to knead and shape, and has a milder flavor, and it's easier to digest. Or just leave it out and use 2.5 cups of your freshly milled flour. Next, add a half a teaspoon of fine sea salt, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and then whisk. Add 4 tablespoons of avocado oil to 1 cup of warm water. Now, if you don't use all the water, most of the oil should still make it to your flour because it floats on top. Or instead, just add 4 tablespoons of butter to the flour and mix it in really well before adding the water. Of course, avocado oil is much healthier. Now, just as with the first flatbread I did, gradually pour some of the water into the flour. Carefully though, not too much. You'll likely have some left over. Work the flour until all of it has been exposed to the water. I like a slightly sticky dough because I can always add flour while kneading it if it's too wet. You can see how most of the flour is no longer on the side of the bowl. That means it's time to rest. It's very important to let the dough rest. Freshly milled flour needs time to hydrate. The longer, the better. I let it sit for an hour if I have time. I'd say a minimum of 30 minutes. Time to knead the dough. Now I'm using all-purpose flour for my working surface. It's much finer than freshly milled flour, which makes the dough easier to work with. The kneading technique I use is I take the right side of the dough, fold it inward, and then rotate the dough counterclockwise and push. Don't rush to add flour. The kneading process should make it a little less sticky. After a bit, add some flour if needed. Look how smooth and soft this dough is. It shouldn't be sticky at this point. Although you don't have to, it's a good idea to let it rest for 5 or 10 minutes or so before making dough balls. Now, just like the first flatbread, my wife's making dough balls between 45 and 50 grams each in order to make 8 to 9 inch tortillas. They're a little bigger than golf ball size. She just rolls them on the working surface to round them out. Using all-purpose flour, she works the dough ball into a small disc and then begins to roll them out. Rolling these tortillas are easier than the survival flatbread she made earlier because this dough has oil in it. And she's using all-purpose flour to assist in rolling rather than the freshly milled flour that she used for the survival bread. Well, it looks like I messed up putting her nice round dough into the pan. It happens. The pan temperature is around medium-high. It seems like whenever I pat the bubbles gently, it encourages them to grow. After about 20 to 30 seconds, I turn it over and I go another 20 or 30 seconds. And then I put it in my tortilla warmer along with all the others. Go ahead and give it a taste.
That's pretty good.
Now you can store your tortillas in a Ziploc bag at room temperature for 2 or 3 days, or your refrigerator for up to 5 days, or you can store them in the freezer for a couple of months. Although we haven't had to use parchment paper or anything to separate them, I have heard many people say they do use it. If you don't want to mill your own flour for the recipes in this video, I suggest using King Arthur's white whole wheat flour. They changed the name to golden wheat whole wheat flour. Simply use it in place of the freshly milled flour in the recipes. It's just as nutritious as King Arthur's regular whole wheat flour, but has a milder and slightly sweeter flavor. Also, it can make the dough a little more tender and easier to handle. Thank you for watching my video. If you liked it, please hit like and share, and don't forget to subscribe. Y'all have a great day, and thanks again for watching.